think for a moment. Last Sunday I reflected upon the word motivations, and we explored two ideas, the ideal and the real. And today I want for you to look at, in this motivations, is promotions and preventions of goals, in a way that you motivate yourself to see the do's and the don'ts. Good morning, and welcome all of you who are here present, but also those of you who are watching us on live streaming. The scriptures this morning kind of help us and give us that beautiful image in two different stories, in parables of the vineyards, that God truly cares for the earth and cares for each one of our souls and the way we live our lives. And how we respond to that can create such a big difference. The first in the prophet Isaiah, as I said in the commentaries, that the land of Israel represent the vineyards of the Lord. And yet they rejected or rebelled against that great gift that God has given to them, the promised land filled with honey and water overflowing. And so as the prophet Isaiah right in the conclusion of this reading this way, the vineyards of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah look for judgment but see bloodshed, for justice but hark the outcry. Isaiah captured for us the whole plan of histories of God's salvations, specifically on the Exodus events, how God rescued his people out of Egypt and wandering in the desert for 40 years. And now they are in the promised land, and yet their rebellious of their rejections of God's love and the rejections of God's covenant continue to persist. Even though God did everything for them, as it says here. My friend has a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He spaded, cleared it of its stones, and planted on choicest wines. Instead of us producing good fruit, remaining faithful to God's covenant, God's chosen people reject all of that and rebel all of that and produce bad grapes or bad fruits. And that could happen to all of us too. Sometimes our family provide all the environments that we needed, all the necessity that we ever needed, that my parent generation, that your parent generations may not have that same opportunity. Whatever you need, whatever you want, they provide it for you. All your educations are also being paid for some of you who are fortunate enough. If not, we are living in a land where there are enough opportunities that we can borrow loans or scholarships that allow us to advance our educations. And yet because of our own rejections of that love in the family or in the community or in the church here in the life that God has chosen for us, then it can lead to the major consequences that you and I may not see because of our own rebellious or rejections of that love. And here for God's people, it's exiles to a foreign land for another 40 years. And so sometimes the consequences of your rejections and my rejection of God's love or of our own family love for all of us, we're taking it for granted. And so that's the first image that Isaiah brought for us. In our gospel reading, Jesus also provides the same image of the vineyards. And it goes exactly the same way. And Matthew proclaimed it this way. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a hedge around it, dug a wine press in it, and built a tower, and then leased it to a tenant and went on a journey. And it produced good fruit. There's great fruitfulness. The difference between Jesus' parables versus Isaiah parables is it's in the tenants. They see this great fruitfulness. They don't want to share it with anybody. They don't want to realize what goodness that they have. They become more. That's a reality sometimes that can happen to all of us. Because of that self-centeredness, we can become very rebellious. We can become rejections of all that God has given to us. And so instead of leading rebellious rejection in the first reading to exiles, we can resort to killing or demonstrations. And that whole analogy as we come to see here. They seized the servants, one they beat, another they killed, and a third they stoned. And ultimately, God sent Jesus Christ into the world. And so this parables of Matthew chapter 21, as I said in the setting, Jesus now in the temple, turned the temples, right? Instead of a place of worship, it's become a marketplace. And so last Sunday, he used the parables of the two sons to reflect for us the will of God and not to do the will of God. And now they're confronting the scribes and the Pharisees and say, you are rebelling against the fruitfulness that God has given to you. You are living in the land, the promised land that God has given to you. And yet you are rejecting it, and that God sent Jesus into the world. And you still rejecting him to the point of killing him. And so he writes this way. Did you never read in the scriptures, the stones that the builder rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord has this been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes with a question mark. So Jesus is trying to change the mindset and motivate the scribes and the Pharisees. Look, this is who I am. I am the Son of God. I am the Messiah. And yet you are rejecting and you're rebelling everything that God has given to all of you. And I am the fruitfulness of that gift, the ultimate gift of God's gift. And maybe all of us as children, sometimes we have done that. Our parents provide so much. And because of our own search for independence, our search for our own identity, we reject everything. And sometimes we do it on purpose. And oftentimes we do it out of great innocence, because our desire for that independence, our desire for that search. And so that leaves us then to reflect upon what motivates you not to have that rebellious identity or rejections identity. And so that's where we look at, and that's why I encourage you to reflect upon that two ideas, promotions or preventions of goals. How God gave everything, and yet either we can prevent that goal from being more fruitful, or we can promote that goal to be more fruitful. And so this is what it looks like when we look at what promotion, what preventions of goals look like. They're more for do and don't, so sometimes we need to have a balance between the two. So don't look at prevention being something that's negative. But prevention is something that maybe help us to turn and just to reflect upon. It's not as an obstacle to what you wanting to do or not wanting to do. So in promotions of goals, about things you want to achieve, they express the outcome. In preventions of goal, then you look at more, they're about preventing negative outcomes and steering you clear of the uncomfortable situations. You know what you don't want, and you know where you don't want to be. So one is give you a very positive aspect, very optimistic aspect of your outcomes. The other one gives you more of a pessimistic, a more cautious approach to where you want to go with the you and what you can do with it or not do with it. So it gives you that whole analysis in every aspect of your life when you search for independence or when you search for identity. For example, the difference between promotions, preventions of goal, and the way that you motivate yourself. The do's versus the don'ts. Promotions of goal tells you what to do. It leads to action. So there are certain steps that you want to take. In preventions of goal tells you what not to do. And sometimes it can give you a negative inclinations or motivations, because it could possibly lead to inactions or lack of directions. And so when you look for the do's and the don'ts and people telling you, these are the things you should do and how you ought to live in the life of God's kingdom, think and help ask people to be more specific. It doesn't stop you from moving on forward. Second, face versus avoid. Promotions of goal encourage you to confront a situation. Preventions of goal strive to steer you clear of a situation. You know, as you know in life, sometimes you search for that independence. You know that confrontations of certain issues, certain life challenges has to take place. You can't avoid it forever. And so in looking at motivating yourself, you want to see that. And so people sometimes in preventions of goal will tell you, no, don't do this, don't do that. And sometimes that's very good, and sometimes it can become so negative motivations. And so it could stagnate you in that part of your journey. Start versus stop. Promotions of goal initiate actions. They set things in motion. Preventions of goal blocks actions. They leave you with nothing to do. So sometime, and oftentimes, depending on what stage of your life you're in, some of you still in your 20s or reaching 20s, you may see maybe that start promotions of goals such an important part because you need to assert yourself and move forward. And sometimes your mom and dad keep kicking you in the, you're behind maybe, and asking you to move forward and not just stay in one place. And that could happen. And yet you are comfortable where you are. You just want to be in your room and sitting in that screen, whether double screen or single screen, and be happy with it. And whatever social media, whatever network that you're using on your computer, you're satisfied. But your world beginning to enclose. And so in this start too, it set you in motions. But sometimes we get older in your 50s and your 60s, certain things may happen. So in preventions of goals, not that it may leave you nothing to do, but it kind of helps you to pause. There are things you used to do and do multitasking. Other things I delegate. Because you realize that where you are and who you are. The fourth, gain versus lose. Promotions of goal versus on getting something that you don't have. Preventions of goal focus on keeping something that you already have. And that is so good to think about. Gaining more experiences, gaining more educational areas that you may not have. But maybe as you get in your 70s, you realize, I'm satisfied with what I have. I have a home, I have a car, I have a place to sleep. What more do I want? Why do you want to invest more and buy more properties or whatever that may be? Investing in another business. And so that areas of motivations, whether I'm promoting to gain myself or am I promoting to prevent myself from expanding even further. And you look at your energies maybe. And so that is faith, the fruitfulness of your faith. Regardless where you are and who you are, God always encourages to promote that fruitfulness, to share that fruitfulness. And so that is such an important journey. Sometime in our rebellious or rejections of God, may it not lead us to exiles, where it take us away from our church, take us away from our own families. And sometime in your own rebellious and rejections of the fruitfulness of God, let us not cause you to become more self-centered and more selfish, but become more self-giving as well as more life-giving.